The alarm was already screaming when I pulled the hauler out of drift sleep, not the gentle ping of a proximity sensor doing its job. The flat, hard wail that meant something nearby was on fire, and the fire was big enough for my ship to notice it from half a kilometer out. I was 3 days out from Callaway Station, running a cargo loop through the Verath corridor. Dried protein packs, hull patch material, and 40 crates of water filters bound for the outer mining platforms. Nothing exciting. Nothing worth stopping for. That was exactly how I preferred my runs. The Verath corridor was a stretch of space that nobody with a flag claimed and everybody without one used freely. Pirates worked here. Smugglers cut through it to avoid the toll lanes. Freelancers like me used it because it was fast and cheap, and the only thing you had to worry about was minding your own business. I was very good at minding my own business. My ship was called the Callow Star. She was not pretty. She was a converted mid-range hauler, 11 years old, held together in places by welds that a ship inspector would have preferred not to look at too closely. But she was fast when I pushed her, and she had never failed me, and I trusted her the way you trust something that has carried you through enough bad nights to prove itself worth keeping. My AI co-pilot was named Myra. She had been installed 3 years ago by the previous owner and came to me as part of the purchase. She was efficient, calm under pressure, and had an extremely flat delivery that I had come to find more comforting than any voice full of emotion ever could be. She had already pulled the sensor data by the time I reached the cockpit. She put it on the main screen without being asked. "One vessel in distress," she said. "Velshari class. That is a Theshan configuration. Heavy damage to the aft section and port side. Active fire in 3 compartments. Structural integrity in the lower decks is failing. There are 6 other ships in the immediate area. Their transponder patterns match Cathari identification codes." I stood in the cockpit doorway and looked at the screen. The Theshans were not people you expected to find in the Verath corridor. They were the oldest and most powerful civilization in this part of the galaxy. 400 star systems. A government so old that their historical records described events humanity had not yet evolved enough to witness. Their ships traveled in protected lanes with escort formations. They did not drift through lawless stretches of deep space alone. Except this one had, for reasons that were not my concern. The Cathari were something different. They were pirates in the truest sense of the word, organized, patient, and thorough. They did not attack targets they could not finish. "Life signs on the Theshan ship?" I asked. "Faint but present. The failing hull is affecting sensor resolution. I cannot confirm exact numbers. What I can confirm is that the aft reactor is showing pre-critical instability. Based on current degradation rate, I estimate approximately 12 minutes before it reaches a point of no return." 12 minutes. I looked at the 6 Cathari ships circling the stricken vessel with the patient ease of something that had already decided the outcome. "Myra," I said, "that ship and those people inside it are not our problem." "That is an accurate assessment," she said. I sat down in the pilot's seat. "Plot me an intercept," I said. She paused for exactly 1 second. Then she said, "Intercept plotted," and I pushed the throttle forward before the sensible part of my brain could organize a proper argument against it. My old commanding officer would have called this a birth defect, the inability to leave a burning building without checking if everyone was out first. I had always called it a habit, one I had never been able to shake, no matter how many times it had cost me something. I came in fast, using the Theshan ship's bulk as cover from the Cathari formation. A single battered cargo hauler without visible weapons was not a threat profile they were scanning for. That was the one consistent advantage of looking like nothing worth worrying about. I matched velocity with the burning ship and engaged the emergency docking collar on the port side. The collar locked with a clang that ran through the entire frame of the Callow Star. The pressure seal confirmed green in 2 seconds. I grabbed what I needed from under the console: a med kit, a breathing mask for the smoke, the compact pulse disruptor that lived in a magnetic clip beneath the dash. Then I went through the airlock at a jog. The inside of the Thesan ship was a different kind of awful. The main lighting had failed, and the emergency strips along the floor threw everything in a dark red that made the smoke look thicker than it already was. The air tasted like burnt insulation and something chemical I did not want to identify. The floor had a lean to it that was not structural design, and somewhere deep in the ship's frame, something was making a sound like metal slowly losing an argument with itself. Myra put the crew layout map on my wrist display, and I moved fast, following it toward the emergency compartments in the ship's center. 3 Cathari boarders came at me from a connecting corridor. The pulse disruptor handled them. I did not slow down. The emergency compartment door had a manual release. I found it, braced myself, and pulled. Inside, 2 Thesan guards in silver-blue armor were on the floor. They had not retreated to shelter. They had died just outside the compartment, facing outward. That told me everything I needed to know about what their last moments had looked like. Against the far wall, strapped into an emergency harness, was a Thesan woman. She was unconscious. Her clothing was formal, layered violet and silver fabric built for a hall or a ceremony, not a burning ship. Her face had the angular precision and faint luminescent quality to the skin that all Thesans had, the kind you only ever saw in news feeds or diplomatic photographs. The thin circlet resting in her hair, tangled but still in place, was not a decoration. It was a rank marker. I had seen images of rank markers like that exactly once, in a briefing packet from my old unit. I looked at it for about 1 second. Then I unclipped her from the harness, lifted her, and started back the way I had come. She weighed almost nothing. I remember thinking that was strange, for someone who would turn out to matter more to the galaxy than most planets. I took the longer route back to avoid the positions where I had heard movement. It cost me 90 seconds. Myra guided me through it calmly, tracking the Cathari through my suit sensors and talking me around them without drama. The airlock was clear. I went through, sealed it behind me, and carried her across into the Callow Star. Myra released the docking collar the instant the inner door sealed. I got to the cockpit, put the Thesan woman carefully on the floor beside the pilot's seat because there was nowhere better to put her, and pushed the throttle to full. The Cathari responded. They opened fire when they saw the hauler moving. I went evasive. The Callow Star was not built for combat, but she was responsive, and I had flown her long enough to know what she could do when she needed to. 2 shots hit the port shield array. 1 missed wide. I put distance between us fast. Behind us, the Thesan ship's reactor section let go. The shockwave hit hard enough to throw the hauler sideways. I pulled her back onto course. The Cathari formation, caught much closer to the explosion, scattered and did not regroup into pursuit. I checked the sensors, nothing following. Then I checked the woman on the floor, breathing steadily. "Vitals are stable," Myra said. "Minor concussion, some bruising, nothing critical. Hull integrity at 90%. Port shields will need recalibration when we next dock. The Cathari have disengaged." "Good," I said. I did not know her name yet. I did not know she was the 3rd heir to the Thesan eternal throne. I did not know that the next half-year of my life was about to become the strangest, most complicated, most unexpectedly significant stretch of time I had ever experienced. I just knew she was breathing, and the ship was still flying, and my hands had stopped shaking. I pulled a thermal blanket out of the emergency kit and covered her with it. Then I set course for the nearest neutral station, told Myra to watch the sensors, and went to make coffee. It was terrible coffee. It always was. But it was hot, and by the time I finished it, the stars outside the cockpit window were still and quiet, and the sensors showed nothing behind us. She weighed almost nothing. I kept coming back to that. The Thesan warships found me 9 hours later. Not one or two, 42. A full response formation in complete tactical arrangement, dropping out of transit drive in a synchronized sweep that boxed me in from 6 directions before I had finished my second cup of terrible coffee. Their hulls were long and silver white, built in the Thessian style that looked more grown than manufactured. All smooth curves and zero, unnecessary surface. Beautiful in the way something designed to end arguments permanently is beautiful. Myra ran the count without being asked. 42 vessels, mixed configuration, 8 cruiser class, 14 escort destroyers, and 20 support ships. There is one additional vessel I cannot match to any combat profile in my database. It is significantly larger than the others and carries no standard classification markings. It may be a command ship. They mobilized all of this for one person, I said. Based on the rank marker you noted on her circlet, Myra said, yes, that appears to be consistent. A communication request came through on every available frequency simultaneously. That was not a request. That was a statement of intent wearing the shape of a request. I accepted it. The face on the screen was Thessian, old even by their standards. Pale silver-blue skin pulled tight over angular features, eyes the color of deep water, very still, dressed in robes that communicated authority so directly they barely needed the person wearing them. I am High Consul Veldaren, he said. His translator unit was smooth, almost no delay. You are in possession of someone under the protection of the Eternal Throne. You will prepare to receive a boarding team. She is in my medical bay, I said. She is stable, her vitals are steady. You can confirm through a data handshake if you want. She sustained a minor concussion. I did not harm her. I pulled her out of a burning ship. There was a pause, not the pause of someone processing information. The pause of someone deciding whether the information they had received was structured correctly. You pulled her out, Veldaren said. Yes. From the burning ship. That is correct. Another pause. You are human. Last time I checked. I let them board. There was not much point in arguing with 42 warships. The team that came through my airlock was 6 Thessian soldiers in full armor and 1 medical officer who went directly to the woman in my medical bay without making eye contact with me. The soldiers positioned themselves around my cockpit with professional precision. They took her to the command ship. Then, to my mild surprise, they asked me to come too. The command ship was enormous on the inside. Everything was built to a scale that implied the people who designed it were not thinking about comfort or efficiency, but about impression. Tall ceilings, long corridors with light that came from inside the walls. The sound of my boots on the floor was the only thing that echoed. Everything Thessian was quiet in the way that made you lower your voice without being asked. I was taken to a room that was either a conference chamber or a formal court. It had a long curved table of material that looked like dark glass, chairs that were not designed for human proportions, and walls lined with something that absorbed sound so completely, the room felt sealed from the rest of the universe. High Consul Veldaren was already seated. He was accompanied by 4 advisors and a figure I could not immediately place, whose rank markings made Veldaren's look modest by comparison. They sat, I stood. No one offered me a chair, but I had not expected one. Veldaren looked at me for a long moment before he spoke. You are Sergeant Darian Cole, formerly of the United Earth Space Force Medical Division, decommissioned honorably 4 years ago, currently licensed as a freight hauler, operating independently under a Callaway Station charter. He paused. Is that accurate? It is, I said. You entered the Verath corridor on a routine freight run. You detected a vessel in distress. The vessel was Thessian registry. You docked with it while under active engagement from Cathari forces. You entered the vessel, neutralized several boarders, located the passenger in question, extracted her, and departed before the vessel's reactor failure. All of this while operating a single cargo hauler with no support and no combat mandate. Myra helped, I said, my AI co-pilot. Velderin did not appear to have a category for that response. He moved on. You are aware of who you recovered. I know she is high-ranking. I recognize the circlet. She is Vaishant Thesara, Velderin said, third heir to the eternal throne, daughter of the sovereign. She represents a line of succession that has continued for over 4,000 years. He let that settle for a moment. She is, in short, irreplaceable. I did not say anything. Velderin straightened. The posture shift was subtle but communicated a gear change. Under Theshan law and the protocols of the Eternal Throne, he said, we are now bound by the right of boundless debt. This right applies in any circumstance where a being outside the Dominion risks their own life to preserve the life of a member of the royal bloodline. The right is not a courtesy. It is a legal obligation binding on the entire Dominion. He looked at me without moving. You may claim anything within our power to grant: territory, vessels, wealth of any scale. Noble title within our governing structure, a military commission at senior rank, political position, diplomatic standing, a planet if you prefer one. The right has no ceiling. The room was very quiet. One of his advisors was watching me with the focused attention of someone who had spent their career reading people, and was currently reading mine very carefully. I thought about it. Not for very long. I would like my ship repaired, I said. The port shield array took hits during the extraction, and a full fuel load if that is possible. The silence that followed was a different quality than anything the room had produced before. Velderin's expression did not change, it froze. That was not the same thing. One of his advisors leaned toward him and spoke in Theshan, too fast for my translator to catch. Velderin raised one hand slightly, and the advisor stopped. Could you repeat your request? Velderin said carefully, so that I can be certain the translation has rendered correctly. Repairs to my port shield array, I said, and a fuel load, whichever grade you can spare. Another advisor spoke, loud enough this time for my translator to catch it. The human may not understand the scope of what is being offered. I understand it, I said. Then you are perhaps confused about the nature of the right, Velderin said. There is no limit of. I heard you, I said. Shield repairs, fuel, that is what I am asking for. The silence stretched long enough to become something else entirely. Velderin looked at me with an expression I had never seen on a Theshan face before, and have never seen since. It was the expression of a person confronting a calculation they could not make balance no matter how they arranged the numbers. Why, he said, it was not phrased as a demand, it was almost quiet, almost genuine. I thought about how to answer that. I did not pull her out of that ship to get something, I said. I pulled her out because she was in a burning ship and I could reach her. That is the whole of it. Asking for something large in exchange would change what the thing was. I do not want to change what the thing was. The room absorbed that. None of the advisors spoke. Velderin looked at me for what felt like a very long time. Then he looked at the table surface. Then he looked at his advisors in turn. Something passed between them that I could not read. Your ship will be repaired, he said finally. A full fuel load will be arranged. Medical treatment will also be provided for any injuries you sustained during the extraction. He paused. It will be done. I thanked him. He acknowledged it with a nod that seemed to require some effort. As I was escorted out, I caught a glimpse through a half-open door of a screen showing the feed from the conference room. Someone had been watching the exchange. I only saw her for a second before the door closed. She was sitting upright in a chair, a thin blanket over her shoulders, the circlet gone from her hair. Her eyes were very still. I did not know what she had made of any of it. Later, while two Theshan engineers worked on the Kalos Star's shield array in focused silence, Myra told me that Velderin had filed an official observation report on the incident. He described you as an anomaly of uncertain intent, she said. That is the nicest thing anyone has written about me in an official document, I said. It was not written as a compliment, Myra said. I know, I said. I still like it. My shields were repaired to a standard that exceeded the original installation. The fuel tanks were filled with a grade of fuel the Callow Star had never run on before and would likely never run on again. When the Theshan engineers left, one of them paused at the airlock and looked at my battered hauler with an expression that I could only describe as respectful. I undocked and watched the fleet dissolve back into transit drive from my cockpit window. 42 ships, here for one person, gone in less than a minute. The Varath corridor was quiet again. I set course for Callaway Station, let Myra take the controls, and sat in the pilot's seat staring at nothing in particular. I had done what I always did. I had gone into the burning building and come out the other side. The universe had tried to pay me for it, which was new. But the thing I had done was still the same thing it had always been, and I needed it to stay that way. I went to bed. I slept better than I had in months. 6 months passed. I hauled cargo. I fixed things on the Callow Star that had needed fixing for a year. I ran the Callaway Loop twice, the outer rig circuit once, and a one-off charter to a station near the rim that paid well and asked no questions. Myra updated her navigation charts. I updated my coffee rations, which had been running critically low. The story had gotten around. Freelancer channels talk, and the Varath incident had too many moving parts to stay quiet. By the 3rd week after it happened, I was already hearing versions of it that bore very little resemblance to what had actually occurred. By the 2nd month, someone had posted an account on a public feed that described me as charging through a Kethari formation single-handedly and defeating 12 boarders in close combat. The real number was 3, and the pulse disruptor had done most of the work. But the part people kept latching onto was not the fight. It was the aftermath. The part where a human had been offered a planet and asked for a fuel tank. That detail had a life of its own. I heard it repeated back to me at least a dozen times by people who thought they were telling me something I had not already lived. Pete Adler, who ran cargo out of Callaway and was one of 3 people I would genuinely call a friend, bought me a drink at the station bar the 3rd time we crossed paths after the incident and said, "You know you are an idiot, right?" "I have been told," I said. "An actual planet, Darien, or a fleet, or enough credits to retire and buy a planet separately. I know what they offered. And you asked for your shields. They were damaged." Pete stared at me with the expression of a man confronting a mystery he lacked the tools to solve. Then he drank his drink and changed the subject, because Pete was practical that way. Life was quiet. I preferred it quiet. Then, 6 months and 4 days after the Varath corridor, an unmarked vessel docked at the outer ring of Callaway Station, while I was running a diagnostic on the Callow Star's secondary navigation array. Myra flagged it immediately. "That ship is Theshan construction," she said. "The hull alloy composition and thruster configuration are consistent with Dominion manufacturing. However, it carries no Dominion transponder code and no identification markings. It is, for all official purposes, invisible." "Who parks an invisible Theshan ship at Callaway?" I said. "Someone who does not want to be seen arriving," Myra said. I set down the diagnostic tool. She came through the station's docking ring on foot. No guards, no entourage, no rank marker in her hair. She was dressed in clothes that were clearly Theshan in cut but chosen deliberately to avoid standing out. Gray and plain, nothing that announced anything. It almost worked. She was still unmistakably Theshan in the way she moved and held herself, and the handful of people in the docking corridor who noticed her did the very human thing of looking twice and then quickly looking away, as though eye contact might be rude. She came to the Callow Star's dock and stopped at the foot of the ramp. I was standing at the top of it. We looked at each other for a moment. I am not here as the third heir to the eternal throne, she said. Her translator was very good, almost no mechanical quality to it at all. She had clearly spent time on it. I want to establish that first. All right, I said. I am here as Vaishyan, she said, just that. All right, I said again. Do you want to come in? I have coffee. She considered that for a moment. I was told human coffee is an acquired taste. That is generous, I said. Mine specifically is more of a challenge. She came up the ramp. She sat in the co-pilot's seat, which was the most comfortable seat on the ship aside from mine. I made the coffee. It was as bad as advertised. She held the cup with both hands, tried a small amount, and set it down with the careful expression of someone being diplomatic about something unpleasant. Myra, to her credit, stayed quiet. Vaishyan looked around the cockpit slowly. The worn panels, the repair patches, the small personal items I had collected over years, a photograph from before my service, a coin from a planet I had only visited once, a small carved piece of stone a child on an outer rim station had given me for fixing a water pump. This is your home, she said. Has been for a while, I said. I spent 6 months, she said, slowly, and with the precision of someone who had prepared what they wanted to say, trying to understand what you did. I pulled someone out of a burning ship, I said. That part I understood, she said. The part I could not understand was the offer, the right. What happened in that room with Veldaren? She looked at her hands. In Theshan culture, every act of significance has a ledger, a weight, something given, something owed. It has been this way for 4,000 years. It is not a law. It is deeper than a law. It is simply how things are, how they have always been. She looked up. What you did not fit the ledger. There was no weight on your side. You gave the thing and kept nothing. I kept the fuel, I said. You know what I mean. I do, I said. I studied humans, she said, formally with researchers and historical archives and behavioral texts, and I found this pattern. She paused. Humans do this. Not all the time, not always, but the pattern exists across your entire history, giving without ledger, acting without expectation of return, sacrificing for people you do not know and will never meet again. She shook her head slightly. We do not have this. Theshans do not have this. The closest concept in our culture is pity extended from strength, but that is not what you did. No, I agreed. So, she said, I came to give you something. You do not need to give me anything, I said. I know, she said, that is the point. She reached into a pocket of her plain gray jacket and set something on the console between us. It was small, about the size of my closed fist, dark crystalline material, smooth on all surfaces, slightly warm in a way that was clearly not coming from ambient temperature. It had a depth to it when you looked into it, as though the darkness inside was not solid but a distance. This is a Theshan resonance seal, she said, personal grade, not a Dominion instrument, not a political tool. It carries my mark and mine alone. I looked at it carefully. What does it do? In practical terms, she said, every Theshan in the galaxy who encounters it will know it is mine. No Theshan ship will target a vessel carrying it. No Theshan port will refuse entry. No Theshan court will close its doors. Not because of rank or treaty or political obligation. Because it is my seal and I gave it freely, and that means something in my culture that goes deeper than law. What does it mean exactly? I asked. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, there is a designation in our language. It does not translate cleanly. The closest equivalent in yours would be something between chosen family and trusted soul. It means I have decided by my own choice and without any compulsion that you are mine to stand for, and I am yours. She paused. It is the rarest thing a Theshan gives. Most never give it at all. I looked at the seal, then I picked it up to hand it back to her. She put her hand over mine and closed my fingers around it. You do not return a thing freely given, she said. That is the first human custom I have decided to adopt. I held it. It was warm. I am a cargo hauler, I said. I haul protein packs in water filters. I am not. I know what you are, she said quietly. That is why. I did not have a response to that. Myra, I noticed, was running an unusually thorough maintenance cycle on a system that did not need it, which was her way of pretending not to listen when she was absolutely listening. Vaishon stood. I will not make your life complicated, she said. That is not my intention. But, I said. She looked at the seal in my hand, but I cannot promise it. She left the same way she had arrived. Quiet, plain clothes, no announcement. The invisible Theshan ship undocked from the outer ring 2 hours later and was gone without a trace. I sat in the cockpit holding a piece of crystalline warmth that apparently entitled me to walk into 400 star systems like I had business being there. Myra, I said. Yes. How many star systems does the Theshan Dominion span? Current territorial records indicate 411 systems, she said, with an estimated total population of approximately 900 billion people. I sat with that number for a long time. She gave this to cargo hauler, I said. She gave it to you, Myra said. I think that is the distinction she was making. I put the seal on the console. It sat there, warm and dark and impossibly quiet. Outside the cockpit window, Callaway Station moved in its slow, indifferent rotation. Docking lights blinked in steady intervals. A supply shuttle crossed the window left to right. The universe looked exactly the same as it always had. But it was not. The seal changed things slowly at first, like water finding the cracks in stone, and then all at once, like the stone finally giving way. I kept the seal on a cord around my neck, not for display. I wore it under my shirt where it sat warm against my collarbone and never went cold, not even in the chill of deep drift sleep when the ship's heating cycled low. I did not show it to people. I did not announce it. But Theshan sensors could read it through hull material and clothing both, and after the first time, I passed through the edge of Dominion-adjacent space, and a patrol ship that would normally have queued me for inspection simply changed course and left me alone. I understood that the seal had a presence that needed no management from me. The first complication arrived in the form of a message. It came through a public relay addressed to my ship by name, short, clean, no identity attached. It said, "You carry something you do not fully understand. There are those who will use it against you. Remove yourself from Theshan favor and no action will be taken. Continue and you will become a useful pressure point. This is offered as information, not as a threat. Act accordingly." I read it twice. Then I filed it under things to think about later and went back to recalibrating the navigation array, which had been giving me false positives on asteroid proximity for 2 weeks. I mentioned it to Myra. "Krath hegemony," she said without hesitation. "You identified the source. The relay encoding has markers consistent with Krath intelligence communication patterns. They use a specific redundancy structure that is distinctive if you know what to look for." She paused. "The Krath hegemony has been in political opposition to the Theshan Dominion for approximately 2 centuries. They view any increase in Dominion reach or influence as a direct threat to their regional position. And a human with a Theshan kinship seal is an expansion they did not anticipate," I said. "That would be my analysis," Myra said. I thought about a number of sensible, measured responses to receiving a warning from a foreign intelligence service. Then a second message arrived and pushed all of that aside completely. This one came through Callaway Station's freight network, routed to me by a contact named Owen Gareth, who ran a relief logistics operation out of the mid-rim stations and occasionally gave me charter work when the humanitarian budget could stretch to private haulers. It said, "Got a problem. Murray convoy, 42 people, critical medical cases included, sitting at the edge of the Theshan Dominion's outer boundary, Sector 12. Dominion has a blockade up due to the trade dispute with the Murray government. The blockade is not letting supply ships through. These people have nothing to do with the government dispute. They are civilians, children among them. I need a ship with a reason the Theshan patrol will let it through. I do not have one. You might. I read it twice as well. Then I called Owen on a direct channel. How critical are the medical cases? I said. 2 elderly patients will not survive another week without the supply packages. The rest are borderline. Darian, I have been working this blockade for 3 weeks through official channels. The Dominion Patrol Commander is following orders, and those orders are not bending. Load them, I said. I will fly escort. Put the convoy together and meet me at Relay Point 7 in Sector 12. I will be there in 36 hours. I disconnected before Owen could work through his list of reasons this was uncertain. If I waited for the full list, I would never go. I told Myra to plot the course. She plotted it without comment. We arrived at Relay Point 7 to find 3 battered medium transport ships sitting in a tight cluster with their running lights dimmed, the way ships hold still when they are waiting near something they are not sure about. Owen was on the lead vessel. He patched through the moment the Callow Star dropped out of transit. The blockade line is 400 kilometers ahead, he said. 12 Theshan patrol ships. They have been very clear about their orders. I know, I said. I brought the Callow Star to the front of the convoy formation. I pulled the seal from under my shirt and registered it on the ship's active transponder identification, a function I had only recently learned the seal was compatible with. The transponder broadcast the seal's marker code outward into open space. Let me do the talking, I told Owen. I opened a channel to the Theshan patrol. The patrol commander's face appeared on my screen. Mid-rank, the expression of someone who was not enjoying their current assignment but was committed to it. Unidentified convoy, she began. My name is Darian Cole, I said. I am registered with Callaway Station as a licensed freight hauler. I am currently transmitting my vessel's transponder alongside an active seal marker. I request passage for my formation through the current boundary. She looked at something off-screen. Her expression shifted by 1 small degree. Not warmth, something more like recalibration. The boundary applies to all non-Dominion vessels, she said, regardless of seal status. The people in this convoy are not connected to the trade dispute between your government and the Murray Authority, I said. There are 42 of them. 2 are in critical medical need. None of them carry political function. I am asking for passage on humanitarian grounds. She looked off-screen again, longer this time. There was a conversation happening that I could not hear. I waited. The seconds stretched. Then she looked back at me. Passage is authorized for the listed formation. Your transponder seal will be logged as reason of passage. You are cleared through. A pause. Do not take longer than necessary. We will not, I said. The convoy moved. The Theshan patrol ships held position. The line of silver warships parted like a current around a rock, and 3 battered transports carrying 42 people who had nothing to do with any political dispute passed through without a word from anyone. I watched the last transport clear the line, then I followed it through. On the other side, Owen came back on channel. His voice was not steady. That worked, he said. I hoped it would, I said. You were not certain. I was reasonably confident, I said. I could hear Owen deciding not to ask the follow-up question. 2 days later, Vaishon contacted me on a private channel I had not known she had. Her tone was measured in the precise way that told me she was choosing every word carefully. I heard about the convoy, she said. News travels fast, I said. In Dominion circles it does, she said. The patrol commander filed a report. Using a kinship seal as a transit credential for a third-party humanitarian convoy is not exactly standard procedure. There was not a standard procedure for my situation, I said. No, she said, There was not. A pause. You have complicated my political position. I am sorry about that, I said. Another pause. Longer. Then, in a quieter tone, you are going to be profoundly inconvenient for the rest of your life. Probably, I said. I was before the seal, to be honest. Something that might have been a sound of quiet amusement came across the channel. Brief, and she moved past it immediately, but I caught it. The Dominion Council is debating what to do about you, she said. Some want the seal formally recognized in our legal structure and a defined role created. Some want it treated as a private matter with no official standing. Some want it quietly set aside. Can they do that? I said. No, she said simply. The seal is mine. It cannot be touched by the council. She disconnected. I sat back in the pilot's seat. I thought about the Krath message still sitting in my inbox. I thought about a patrol line parting for 42 people who had nowhere else to go. I thought about how Seth and Oren, on a Krath ship that had not yet found me, would one day represent the kind of cost that came with being a pressure point in someone else's strategic calculation. The universe did not slow down because I had decided not to engage with it. The seal on my chest stayed warm. The stars outside stayed indifferent. And somewhere in 411 star systems, a council of legislators was trying to figure out what category to put me in. I opened the Krath message one more time, read it once, then sent a one-line reply to their relay. It said, "Noted, not interested, have a good day." Then I deleted the thread and went back to work. The Krath moved 3 months later. Not with another message. They were professionals, and they had clearly decided that words had not produced the result they wanted, so they did the next thing on their list. I was at a refueling depot in the outer sector of the Meridian Belt, a small independent station called Harker's Post that ran on generator power and the goodwill of passing traders, when 4 people in civilian clothing surrounded me in the corridor between the docking bays and the station's small exchange market. They were good. I did not see them arrange themselves. One moment the corridor was an ordinary corridor with ordinary traffic, and the next I had people on all 4 sides with a very clear geometry to their positioning. The one directly in front of me was a woman, tall, light gray eyes doing the steady, calm calculation of someone at work rather than someone in a conflict. "We are not going to hurt you," she said. "That is usually what people say before they do," I said. "In this case it is accurate," she said. "We need you to come with us." "I have cargo runs scheduled," I said. "Your ship will be docked safely here," she said. "Your AI will not be harmed. You will be treated well. This is not about causing you injury." She held my gaze steadily. "It is about sending a message." "To the Dominion," I said. She did not answer that, which was itself an answer. I thought about my options. The corridor was not wide. The 4 of them were positioned well. The pulse disruptor was sitting in its clip under the cockpit dash on the Callow Star, which was a decision I was currently revising my long-term opinion on. "All right," I said. I went with them. Myra's voice came through my earpiece as they walked me toward the far docking ring. "I see what is happening. I am logging everything. I will contact." "Do not contact anyone yet," I said quietly. A pause. "Darian." "Give me some time first," I said. 12 hours. If I have not checked in, then contact someone." "That is not a protocol I agree with," Myra said. "I know, do it anyway." They took me on a Krath ship, clean interior, efficient. The Krath aesthetic was function without ornamentation, which I found I could genuinely respect even under the circumstances. I was placed in a room designed as a comfortable holding space rather than a cell. A bed, a table, a small window showing the blur of Transit Drive. Food delivered twice daily that was not interesting but was nutritious. They had thought this through. My captor, whose name I eventually learned was Commander Lena Vaz, came to see me on the second day. She sat across the table from me, with the straightforward manner of someone who had not come to be cruel or clever, only to conduct a transaction. "You understand why you are here," she said. "You want the Dominion to feel a point of vulnerability," I said. "Someone connected to the princess through a personal bond is a better lever than a political or military one. It is harder to respond to without showing emotion, and showing emotion in a political context costs credibility." She looked at me for a moment. "You are more analytical about this than I expected." "I have been a pressure point before," I said. "In military contexts, I understand the logic." "Then you understand that this ends when the Dominion makes a concession on the territorial access dispute in the Krath border systems," she said. "Once they do, you go home." "And if they do not move," I said. "Then the situation continues," she said simply. I nodded slowly. "Can I have more coffee?" I said. "The provision they sent is underdosed." She blinked, then she said, "I will see what we have." The coffee they provided on the third day was considerably better than my own. I told Commander Vaz this directly. She seemed genuinely unsure how to receive that information. The guards assigned to my corridor were rotated in pairs. The first pair were formal and distant. The second pair, who worked the night cycle, were younger and noticeably more curious. By the fourth day, I knew their names: Seth and Oren. Seth was studying navigation in his off hours. Oren had a younger sibling back in the hegemony's home systems who was determined to join the military against the family's preference. We talked through the door most evenings. By day 6, they had started leaving the door open during our conversations, which was not security protocol, but was a very natural thing to do when you had started thinking of someone as a person rather than an object. I was not working an escape. I was not running any plan. I was just being myself, which is sometimes the same thing as a strategy and sometimes not. In this case, I was willing to let it be neither. On the 7th day, Myra's 12-hour window had long since elapsed. What Vaishon did was not use official channels. What she did was invoke, before the full Dominion Council in open session with witnesses present, the instrument of personal kinship law. It was an ancient provision in Theshan legal code, unused in over 3 centuries, that allowed a member of the royal bloodline to formally declare that an offense against a soul bonded was a direct offense against the bloodline itself. The distinction was not symbolic. Under Theshan law, an offense against the royal bloodline required a response at the level of state action, and the council had no instrument to prevent it. The Dominion Council could not set aside a royal kinship claim. It was not within their power. The instrument, once invoked publicly on record, had the force of the eternal throne behind it and the weight of 4,000 years of unbroken precedent. 107 Theshan warships dropped out of transit drive at the edge of Krath hegemony space, in a formation that covered every exit vector from the region where my location signal had been traced. They did not open fire. They did not broadcast ultimatums. They simply arrived, and they held position, and the weight of their presence said everything that words would have taken longer to communicate. Inside my comfortable holding room, I became aware of a change in the ship's ambient sound. The slight vibration shift of external proximity sensors coming fully active, raised voices somewhere down the corridor. Seth and Oren, audible through the open door, exchanging fast and quiet words between them. "Seth," I said through the door. He appeared at the opening. His expression was the specific expression of a young person encountering a situation that had grown significantly larger than anticipated. "There are Dominion ships outside," he said. "How many?" I said. He told me the number. I sat with it for a moment. "Seth," I said, "I want to be clear that I have no intention of having anyone hurt over this. Not your people and not the Theshans. Can you take me to Commander Vaz?" He looked at me for a long second. Then he stood back and let the door open fully. Commander Vaz was in the ship's command center when I arrived, flanked by Oren and two senior officers, in the middle of a communication exchange that was clearly not proceeding in the direction she had planned. Her gray eyes, when she looked at me, had taken on the quality of someone revising their understanding of a situation in real time. 107 ships, she said. I am told that is accurate, I said. We expected a political response, perhaps a formal demand, possibly a small show of force formation. She looked at me with something that was not quite anger. It was more like honest assessment. We did not anticipate this. She is thorough, I said. Vaz looked at the communication feed. The Thessian fleet was holding position, silent, waiting. She invoked personal kinship law, Vaz said. That instrument has not been used in 3 centuries. I know, I said. You are a cargo hauler, she said. I know that too, I said. How, she said and stopped, then tried again. How does a cargo hauler become this? I thought about a burning ship in the Varath corridor. A woman in a torn formal dress strapped into a harness with 2 dead guards in front of her door. Something that weighed almost nothing in my arms. I did not plan it, I said. No, she said after a moment. No, I believe that. The negotiation that followed took 6 hours. I was not part of it. I sat in Commander Vaz's personal office, which she gave me because the holding room felt insufficient for the circumstances, and I drank the good coffee and read through a civilian news archive available on an open terminal. The Krath hegemony agreed to terms. The Dominion committed to formally engage with the territorial access dispute in the border systems. In return, the Krath would release me and acknowledge the seal's status as a protected credential going forward. Not an ideal resolution for either side, but workable, which is what most real resolutions look like when the pressure is removed. Vaz walked me to the airlock personally. She stopped before the door. You are going to continue doing this, she said. It was not a question. Hauling cargo, I said. Accumulating gravity, she said. Every action creates consequence. Every consequence creates more consequence. You do not seem to understand that you are no longer a person moving through events. You are an event yourself. I will try to keep it small, I said. You said that about the convoy, she said. I did not have a good answer to that. She extended her hand, which was a human gesture she had either studied or naturally adopted, and I shook it. Good luck, Cole, she said. You too, I said, and I meant it. A Thessian escort shuttle was waiting outside the Krath ship. 2 soldiers, formal and professional. They brought me to the command ship of the Thessian fleet, where everything was tall-ceilinged and clean and quieter than a place with that many people aboard had any right to be. She was waiting in a room near the forward section, not a conference chamber this time, smaller, warmer, 2 chairs facing a floor-to-ceiling transparency that looked out into open space. The stars outside were steady and calm the way they always are when everything on this side of the window is not. She stood when I came in. I noticed she was not in formal dress. She was in practical clothes, the kind you wear when you are going somewhere rather than being seen somewhere. She looked at me for a moment without speaking. Then she said, "Are you hurt?" No, I said. They treated me well. The coffee was genuinely excellent. Something moved briefly across her face. I had been getting better at reading Thessian expressions, which were subtle in ways that human faces are not naturally trained to parse. That particular one was relief wearing the shell of composure, and not quite managing to hide which was which. 107 ships, I said. Yes, she said. That is a significant fleet to move for 1 cargo hauler. It is the appropriate response under kinship law, she said. Vation, I said. She looked at me. Thank you, I said. She nodded once, with the slight precise motion of someone accepting something they were not entirely certain how to receive. We sat down. The stars outside the transparency were still. The fleet was already beginning to break formation and return to transit configuration, 107 ships dissolving back into the lanes they had come from, vast and silver and quiet. "The Council wants a decision," she said after a while. "What kind of decision?" "About you," she said. "Your status, what you are in our structure. They want a defined category." She looked at the stars. "They are not comfortable with things that do not fit categories." "Neither am I said, "generally." "They have proposed several options," she said. "Political attaché, honorary dignitary, formal ally designation." She paused. "None of them fit." "No," I agreed. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had the careful deliberateness of her first visit to the Callow Star, when she had been saying something she had prepared. "I want to propose something different," she said. "Before the Council, formally, on record and with witnesses, a new designation, one that does not exist in Theshan law yet but would, once named. It would require my formal petition and the Council's ratification." She paused. "But the Council will not refuse a royal petition. Not after today." I waited. "In our language," she said, "the designation would be Velshari unarmed. The translation is not clean, but the closest rendering in yours is one who walks without a blade and still cuts through." She looked at me directly. "It would mean you are formally recognized not as an ally or a dignitary or a political instrument, but as yourself, a human who acts without ledger, who walks into burning ships, who asks for nothing and gives everything." She paused once more. "It would mean the Dominion acknowledges that this thing you do is real, and that we have a word for it now." I looked at the stars for a while. In my chest, the seal was warm. I thought about Pete Adler calling me an idiot over a drink at a station bar. About Owen Gareth's voice not being steady when the blockade line parted. About a woman in a thermal blanket on the floor of my cockpit, breathing steadily in the dark. About Seth and Oren talking through an open door, because it is simply hard to stay distant from a person who is just being who they are. I thought about my old commanding officer telling me the inability to leave a burning building was a birth defect. "If I accept," I said, "will the Council stop trying to put me in other categories?" "Formally and permanently," she said. "And will it reduce the strategic appeal of using me as a pressure point against you?" "Significantly," she said. "All right," I said. She looked at me. "All right," she said. "I accept," I said, "not because I want a title, but because you asked, and because refusing this would cost you something, and I do not want to cost you things." She was quiet for a long moment. "You are the strangest person I have ever met," she said. "I have been told," I said. That night I sat alone in a guest cabin on a Theshan command ship, the seal in my hand, the stars outside the small porthole steady and silent. Myra was docked at Harker's post with the Callow Star, watching the news feeds and almost certainly running maintenance on systems that did not need it. I turned the seal in my fingers, warm and dark and impossibly quiet. I asked for nothing. She gave me everything anyway. The funny part was, when I thought back over all of it, the burning ship and the conference room and the coffee in my cockpit and the convoy and the good coffee in a comfortable holding room and 107 warships waiting in silence, I think I had done the same for her. Not in the same way. Not with fleets or seals or ancient legal instruments. Just by being what I was. Just by not having a ledger. That is probably the most human sentence I have ever said. My old commanding officer called it a birth defect. I still prefer to call it a feature.